Number 8 of our series of lectures titled Perfect Harmony, the Torah Blueprint for Humanity's Partnership with Hashem in the Scientific Age. As always, I'll be happy to hear from you. My email appears below. And as always, I stress the importance of following these lessons in the order that they appear. Each lesson builds upon the previous material that we discussed. And as always, here is a reminder of the goals that we wish to reach in these lectures and the tools at our disposal. Now, in our past lectures, we began to re-examine the popular translations of the Torah and pointed out that in many instances, the well-known literal translations do not convey the most important messages of the Torah. Up to now, we looked at the first 2 words of the first chapter of Genesis and realized that we need to replace the well-known but oversimplified translations with the explanations given here. The first word is Bereshit, which really should be understood as through a process of foremost importance, stemming from wisdom, intelligence, and Torah. Bara created something from nothing, but bursting with infinite Torah wisdom and knowledge. At this point, we paused, and we did not continue with the third word. This is because these first 2 words point to something that was in place before the creation process commenced, something that is based on Torah wisdom and Torah intelligence. In our last lesson, we learned that our sages teach us that 2 major principles were in place as a foundation for the creation, Torah and Tshuva. In other words, reality cannot exist. It is not sustainable without these 2 things, Torah and Tshuva. They are the driving force behind the ongoing creation process from the onset of the Big Bang. In our last lesson, we explained this in detail. The Torah sets down rules of ethical behavior and how to be Hashem's partner in the creation. Tshuva is the universal, all-encompassing mechanism of self-repair that ensures that the Torah-based ongoing partnership with Hashem endures and strengthens over the ages. Now we are ready to move ahead with the next word of the first verse of Genesis. Here's the complete first verse of Genesis chapter 1, and we will focus now on the third word. This word in Hebrew is Elohim, and in most translations, it is usually translated to God. In other words, the Creator first appears only in the third word, after the Torah relays the important information that we learned in the previous lessons. Number 1, that the creation process is one of foremost importance because it emanates from infinite wisdom, intelligence, Torah intelligence. And number 2, that this process of creation is called bara. It is a process in which something is created from nothing, where that nothing means empty in a material sense, but bursting with infinite Torah wisdom and knowledge. Now, as we saw in the previous 2 words of this verse, here also we need to understand that the popular translation for this third word, God, barely scratches the surface of the important messages that the Torah is relaying to us. First of all, it is important to realize that Hashem has only one special name. It consists of 4 letters and appears for the first time in the Torah in the 4th verse of chapter 2 of Genesis, as we see here. This word is not pronounced in the way it is written, and we will use the abbreviation YHVH, which is roughly parallel to the 4 Hebrew letters that make up the word, as you see here. The oral Torah refers to this name as the only one that signifies the infinitely incomprehensible God. All other names for Hashem that appear in the Torah are derived from certain specific attributes that describe Hashem's intentions as they are comprehended by us human beings. We are also taught that besides being the special name, YHVH also is used to emphasize Hashem's compassion and mercy. Now, going back to Genesis 1, verse 1, the only name that appears exclusively throughout the creation story is Elohim, not the special name YHVH. Here, folks, is an image of the first two columns of text in a Torah scroll. And the text is read starting from the upper right, going down the first column, then moving on to the next column, to the left, and so on. Now, the text that I marked within the green brackets, the right column over here, as you see here, and the top of the left column, as you see over here, this text describes the 6 days of creation, and I marked them down, as you can see here. And here appears the 7th day of rest, the Sabbath, the Shabbat in Hebrew. The text within the orange brackets is post-creation. Now, here I marked the appearances of the descriptive name for God, Elohim. I marked them in red circles. And the first appearance of Hashem's special name, YHVH, in light blue. We see clearly that only the descriptive name Elohim appears in the creation story, and it appears 35 times. The special name, YHVH, does not appear at all in the story itself. It appears for the first time post-creation, after the creation of human beings in the 6th day. I stress this again. The Torah does not reveal Hashem's special name even once in the creation narrative. The Torah uses one of Hashem's descriptive names. Here is a classic example of how various translations miss the main message when translating the first chapter of Genesis. Elohim, as we see throughout the 6 days of creation and the 7th day of rest, is the name used in the Torah for Hashem when emphasizing the attribute that us humans perceive as an act of setting down laws or the act of enforcing laws. The word Elohim is so synonymous with laws, lawgivers, and rulers that later in the Torah, it is also used when referring to judges and other prominent leaders, since they are responsible for interpreting and or enforcing the law of the land. You may recall one of the important rules that we learned in a past lesson. This is a good time to review it again. Rule number 2. In many instances, the Torah uses the same word repeatedly to mean somewhat different things. In other words, homonyms. Out of all the possible meanings, the correct meaning would be found in the teachings of Torah scholars based on the oral Torah and would also be consistent with its context in the Torah text. Now, in our lesson today, we meet up again with this rule, since the name Elohim appears as a homonym in the Torah. In general, Elohim means the one responsible for making and or enforcing laws and rules. So here in the creation story, Hashem appears as the one making and enforcing rules. In other places, the same word is used when referring to other enforcers of the law, rulers, judges, and so on. So going back to the first verse of chapter 1, we need to try to understand 2 things regarding the appearance of the word Elohim. Number 1, we would expect the Torah to introduce Hashem with a special profound name, YHVH. Why does the Torah introduce the Creator with the descriptive name Elohim and not use the special name? Why is this the only name used throughout the creation story? Question number 2, we would expect the Torah to introduce the Creator immediately, first and foremost, in the first word. Just like a crown sits on top of a king's head, it should start as Hashem, Yud, YHVH, created the heavens and the earth. Why does the king of the universe appear only in the third word, only after first informing us about the infinite wisdom that was the basis for creation? So here's the point. The closest that the Torah will ever come to describing natural events in any amount of detail is chapter 1 of Genesis. However, even in this chapter, while describing a natural event like creation, it focuses on conveying messages regarding moral and ethical behavior, as opposed to getting into the scientific details of this momentous event. These ethical rules are taught to us in the oral Torah. I would like to explain two messages that emerge from what we learned and from the questions that we asked. These ideas are explained by Harav Kook, Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak HaCohen Kook, one of the most prominent rabbis of the 20th century, who we introduced in past lessons and who we will meet time and time again in this series of lessons. Message number 1, compassion versus the strict letter of the law. Or the special name YHVH that also represents Hashem's compassion versus the name Elohim that represents the strict letter of the law. Harav Kook explains as follows. During the creation process, the universe must develop only according to the laws of nature that emerged from wisdom. In other words, in this period, Elohim rules. God's law-giving attribute, in charge of the laws of nature, is the king during creation. During this creation period, there is no bending of the rules, no room for compassion. The Torah is transmitting a profound message. The blueprint for the creation of the universe does not and cannot include compassion. Compassion can kick in and join the rest of the forces of nature only after the creation process is finished, reality emerged, and in particular, humanity has emerged. Only after the forces of reality are in place and humanity is in place and developing, only at this time forward can compassion play an essential role to sustain life in general and humanity in particular. This message is in direct contrast with some other theological worldviews, other religions that consider compassion to be a fundamental and built-in feature of the creation process itself. Now, the question that arises is as follows. Why not allow for compassion from the onset? If Hashem's laws of nature require the addition of compassion to ensure the success of the creation process itself, then it follows that the laws that were set in place are not an ideal system. They are defective. And if the laws are defective, then they cannot be regarded as being an ideal model of physical reality. In other words, the Creator does not strive for truth and perfection in his creation. The created reality is murky. We cannot differentiate between truth and lies. In any complex situation, compassion can always kick in and serve to gloss over the hard facts. Justice is not served. Evil intentions, lies, and delusions are not exposed and disposed of, and the problem is just kicked down the road till the next even bigger crisis arises. The Torah has established a major principle. Only after the inflexible laws are set in stone and the creation process reaches a crucial point, which is the emergence of the unprecedented intelligent life form known as humanity, only after all this is set in place can the special name YHVH appear and kick in. This occurs in chapter 2 of Genesis. Message number 2, modesty rules. Unlike other kings and rulers who would proudly mention on the outset their name and their conquests, we are being taught the virtues of modesty and humbleness. The beginning of the verse could have been written as shown here. YHVH created the heavens and earth through the Reshit process, and so on, where Hashem himself proudly appears with a special profound name at the onset. But this is not the case. He does not appear. The first word informs us that there is an infinite wisdom-driven process unfolding called Bereshit. Then we are informed that this process is a bara type of creation. Something is created from nothing, bursting with infinite Torah wisdom and knowledge. Finally, the one in charge of this momentous event appears, the law-giving Elohim. The Torah is informing us that the creation itself is an awesome, self-evident display of Hashem's plan. There is no need for YHVH, the special name of Hashem, to flaunt his incomprehensible powers. He chooses to stay behind the screen of physical reality. The final product of this process, the intelligent human, will apply his intelligence to pry out what he can from the secrets of this process. Therefore, the Torah does not stress the science of creation. The Torah is stressing moral lessons. The Big Bang of energy and matter emerged with a message of wisdom, modesty, and humbleness. The Torah is teaching us that modesty is the foundation on which reality can move forward and reach its goal. The oral Torah emphasizes this principle, where our sages state, in all places where we find Hashem's greatness, we also find his modesty. Hashem, YHVH, is hiding over here, behind the scenes of the creation process. So here's a summary of our lesson today. We moved on to the third word of the first verse of Genesis. We asked the following questions. Why does the Torah use the descriptive name for Hashem, Elohim, and not the special profound name, YHVH? Why does Hashem appear for the first time only in the third word and not immediately in the first word, as we would expect? We answer these two questions based on the teachings of our sages, as explained by Harav Kook. We see that the Torah is relaying some important messages. There is a rule of law versus compassion. We looked at this rule and we understood when can the laws of nature work together with compassion, and when do the laws of nature have to be set in place before compassion can also kick in. Rule number 2, the rule of modesty. Modesty is at the core of the creation process and the development of humanity. That's all for today. Shalom, shalom.